Today, my topic of presentation is Advances in Management of GIST. Uh, my moderator is Professor Dr. Manoj Pandey, who is a HOD, Surgical Oncology, IMS PhD. Now, we all are aware of GIST, and if we go through books, it is not a very elaborate topic. It's only covers 4 to few pages, and we think that we know most of the GIST topic. So when I was starting my preparation of this seminar, I thought I will be finishing up in within 10-20 slides only. But while going through multiple papers, I found that it is quite vast, and I would like you to bear with me because I am going to present quite a big topic now. Okay, so in one page, in a nutshell, I want to present the introductory part of GIST. As we all know, it is origin is from the interstitial cells of Kajal, which are the pacemaker cell of GI motility. The median age is from 60 to 65 years, and the entire GIST constitute only less than 1% of GI tumors. But among all the mesenchymal neoplasm of GI tract, it is the most common. Apart from that, there are leiomyosarcoma, leiomyoma, and other tumors in the mesenchyme. But GIST, among all of them, GIST is the most common. It is most often located in stomach and proximal small intestine, like in duodenum, but can occur in any portion of the alimentary tract, starting from esophagus to rectum. And occasionally, it is also found in omentum, mesentery as peritoneum, which are thought to have pedunculated and from the GI tract and has separated. The origin is from actually thought to be the interstitial cells of Kajal, which are originated found only in GI tract. Now, 75% of GIST are discovered when they are less than 4 centimeter and are either asymptomatic or associated with non-specific symptoms. So, when they are incidentally diagnosed during radiological studies or endoscopic or surgical procedures, which are performed to investigate the GI tract disease or to treat an emergency condition such as hemorrhage, obstruction, and perforated blisters. So, as you can see, most of them are incidental finding. GIST operation diagnosis of GIST are less. Operation by after diagnosis. 80% of GIST has gain of function mutation in the KIT proto-oncogene that lead to activation of KIT, which is a receptor tyrosine kinase. Whereas a subset of GIST lacking the KIT harbor activating mutation in a related RTK, the receptor tyrosine kinase, which is a platelet-derived growth factor receptor alpha, or PDGFRA. So these two terms we should be remembering. These are the two receptors which undergo gain of function mutation. And approximately 12% of GIST has no mutation in either KIT or PDGFRA, and they are considered as wild type. And majority of them have mutation or epigenetic silencing of succinate dehydrogenase or SDH subunit, leading to SDH deficient GIST. Now, if we go to the mutational study, KIT receptor has 4 exon site which are mostly mutated, of which exon 11 approximately 70% is mutated. Exon 9 11% mutated, and rest 2 are less than 1% of mutation, 13 and 17 in KIT. So majority of this KIT mutation in GIST affect exon 11. Mutation in exon 9 affect the extracellular ligand binding site, whereas exon 11 is the juxtamembrane receptor site. Now, primary mutation in tyrosine kinase, kinase domain, that exon 13 and 17 are very rare, but they are seen in high frequency secondary mutation, like the imatinib resistant GIST group. Imatinib works better in tumor with mutation in exon 11, and for exon 9, imatinib escalation so better activity. Apart from that, in second line setting, imatinib is resistant mostly, and sunitinib was better. Whereas secondary KIT 17 mutation contribute up to 40% of secondary mutation, which account to resistance of imatinib or sunitinib in GIST patients. And in this situation, regorafenib, which is the third line of therapy, shows therapeutic activity. I will come to the detail of this targeted therapy later on. Whereas in PDGFRA, what we see that exon 12, 14, and 18 are mutated, of which exon 18 shows the most common mutation. They are preferentially epithelial morphology and arises exclusively in stomach. The mutation occurs in 18, 14, and 12, of which the exon 18 D84 to V is the most frequent mutation, up to 60%. And most of the mutation in exon 18, this particular 842V, was characterized by their relative insensitivity to imatinib. And apart from this particular mutation, rest of PDGFR mutation shows some response to imatinib. But in Asia, this PDGFR mutation is rare, less than 5% in compared to Western population. Now, if we go to this picture, clinical diagnosis of gastrointestinal GIST, molecular genetic point of view, I will be spending some time to make clear of what is this molecular parameters. As we can see, CD117 or c-KIT and DOG1 that is diagnosed on GIST1. These are the receptor which are identified with immunohistochemistry. And as we can see, this is the most common receptor mutation that we find in GIST. The blue dash area, as we can see, is the entire area with this either DOG1 or CD117 mutation, receptor finding. But out of which 85% shows KIT or PDGFR mutation, and the rest 15% are wild type. That means there is no KIT or PDGFR mutation. And as we can see above, some KIT PDGFR mutation might not show any immunohistochemistry of DOG1 or CD115, which are about less than 5%. And in the wild type, there is a portion which are SDH deficient, some are NF1 related, or some are BRAF related. And majority are somatic mutation, but less than 1% are among all these mutations are germline mutation. So how to proceed with the diagnosis of GIST? First, we diagnose a mesenchymal tumor which is suspected as GIST. Then we do an immunohistochemistry with DOG1 or CD117. If it comes positive, then it is confirmed. Then we can do a genetic study, and there we can see whether most of them have KIT or PDGFR mutation, but some will have no mutation. They are considered as wild type. Now, if there is the CD117 is negative, so can we rule out the GIST? No. First, we have to also do other immunohistochemistry of SMA, desmin, S100. If any of them comes positive, then they are non-GIST tumor like leiomyoma or any other mesenchymal tumor. But among them, if all are negative, then once again we have to do a genetic study of KIT and PDGFR, because as I told in the previous slide, less than 5% of DOG negative, but they can have this PDGFR or KIT mutation. And if there is no mutation, then we have to go for other multidisciplinary team discussion. So once again, I am going through this topic, like genetic classification, how it helps, and how we're going to classify the varieties of wild type tumors. So if genetic test of KIT PDGFR shows mutation, they can either be sporadic GIST mutation or familial GIST mutation. After finding the among the wild type, we will do a succinate dehydrogenase immunohistochemistry, of which there will be SDH deficient or mutated variety, and there will be SDH competent variety. Now, SDH deficient can be of two types of mutation. It could be a epi mutation, or it could be a germline mutation. Now, the epi mutation can be syndromic or non-syndromic, whereas the germline mutation can also be syndromic or non-syndromic. Germline mutation produces syndrome. It is known as Carney-Strategic syndrome, whereas epi mutation, succinyl dehydrogenase, if it produces syndrome, it is known as Carney-Strategic. And those who have SDH competent GIST, they could be of BRAF V600 mutation or neurofibromatosis type 1 mutation or other mutations. So the question of this genotypic relevance in adjuvant treatment comes, and it's a more relevant in the wild type space where the KIT PDGFR is negative. So it could be SDH deficient, it could be BRAF, it could be NF1, or it could be quadruple wild type. So the correct diagnosis requires a bigger panel, gene panel testing, or the next generation sequencing testing. As per the ESMO guideline, which was considered in 2018, in relevance to NF1 mutation, the molecular features are they are wild type. IHC of SD succinyl dehydrogenase are positive, but all the inactivating mutations are none, and karyotyping is 14 and 22 long-term loss. So what will be the clinical features for them? They will have GIST with neurofibroma, and they have a good long-term prognosis. Their tumors are small dimension, low mitotic index, frequent small intestinal localization, and have NF1 features. They have up to 25% lifetime risk of TMNST. There rarely sporadic KIT mutation can be found, and for them genetic counseling is recommended. So what is the relevance? Relevance is this kind of GIST, there no need of any adjuvant because it won't work. And we should be inspecting more of the small bowel, and patients should undergo lifelong follow-up and genetic counseling. Now for SDH deficient genotype, with include Carnegie-Stratter-Keys syndrome versus Carney, they will have wild-type KIT or PDGRFA, but SDH immunohistochemistry will be negative, whereas inactivating mutation could be either various mutation could be demonstrated or none mutation, as in the methylated group, and karyotyping could be negative, or there could be loss of one or other. Now clinical features could be in Carney-Stride could be paraganglioma with pulmonary chordoma, and Carney-Stratter-Keys could be just with paraganglioma. Now, what are important things? They have female predilection, young age, gastric localization, epithelial morphology, multifocality, lymph node metastasis, serial tumor occurrence, and unpredictable behavior. So, in this kind of people, what we will need? No adjuvant, once again, because imatinib won't work. Locally advanced disease, yes, they are very much high, young age, but they have high chance of locally advanced disease. Lifelong follow-up is required, and also these people need genetic counseling. So now, if we go to the HSCC 8 update, what they are saying about the recent GIST, they have actually sub-classified GIST in the sarcoma group, and a new TNM classification has come for the GIST population. Now, as per we know, histological grading of GIST is different from other sarcoma and depends on the mitotic rate. Now, this mitotic rate per 5 millimeter square area in the microscope, it could be high power field 50 in older microscope or 25 high power field in newer microscope. So the number of field necessary should be determined for the individual microscopes. HSCC prognostic stage grouping for gastric and omental GIST is different, and GIST for small intestine, esophagus, colon, rectum, mesentery, and peritoneum are different. And so appropriate table should be consulted. Pediatric GIST, familial GIST with germline mutation, and syndromic GIST are not staged according to HSCC system. This should be remembered. So according to the new TNM classification, the TNM staging is very simple. 1 is less than 2, 2 is 2 to 5, 3 is 5 to 10, and 4 is more than 10 centimeter. Regional lymph nodes present or absent, distal is present or absent. They have included mitotic rate where less than 5 mitosis per 5 millimeter square. They are not considering of high HPF. It is 5 millimeter square, and for high it is more than 5 mitosis per 5 millimeter square. So in the staging, they have staged in 2 different groups. One is gastric and omental. They are less virulent. So as you can see, up to T4 size with the low mitotic rate, it is included in stage 2. Whereas if we see for esophagus, small intestine, colorectal, mesenteric, and peritoneal GIST, even in T1 lesion, if there is high mitotic rate, they will directly jump to stage 3. So there is stage advancement in this type of group. So they are more virulent, they are considered, if they are having high mitotic rate. So this new update is important and should be remembered. So the registry data collection according to HSCC has included a new thing, like initially tumor site size, mitotic rate, whether there was rupture or the initial 3 were included. Now they have not included, but mention, they have said mention is important, whether there is any tumor rupture or bleed, whether there is any tumor metastasis in liver, peritoneum. KIT immunohistochemistry was already there, but now, if known, mutational status of KIT and PDGRFA is also included. So these are the registry data according to HSCC 8, because these all these are the predictor of aggressiveness of the tumor. Now we come to some discussion about the imaging. I will be discussing in a different manner. First, I will say according to a paper, characteristic of CT scan and the related diagnostic problem. Why CECT is not the first choice for the primary diagnosis. I will come to some of the difficulties, because as per all the GI tumors, we always try to go for primary CT scan. But primary CT scan has been found to be difficult in diagnosing GIST, especially the early GIST. How? Because these tumors are connected to GI wall and they're often difficult to visualize due to poor filling of stomach and intestine with fluid or contrast medium. Lack of characteristic feature of GIST that would differentiate them from other possible lesion like sarcoma, neuroma, carcinoid are not that much specific. Lymphoma, ectopic pancreas also. Now, area of necrosis and cystic degeneration, often they're very large and result in misdiagnosis of intraabdominal abscess, inflamed intestinal loop, conglomerate of intestinal loop, cyst or tumor of pancreas or mesentery. Difficulty in defining the point of origin of large lesion, which invade and push aside surrounding structures and organs. Now, heterogeneous, low or high initial contrasting in the lesion, possible presence of calcification, variant types of enhancement intensity. There is no very specific or very diagnostic markers in the CT scan which can just pinpoint us that yes, this is a GIST, and as well as this is a rare tumor, so radiologists tend to diagnose it with skepticism. If we go to a 2017 clinical imaging study which has done a systematic review of the response of GIST with PET, CT, and MRI, they have found out some important findings. Like morphological imaging modalities like CT are primarily used for both diagnosis as well as therapy monitoring. However, therapy with TKI and other targeted therapy in GIST may lead only to minor tumor volume reduction, even in case of response. Therefore, use of RECIST criteria has some limitation. To overcome this limitation, modified RECIST criteria or other CT-based assessment like CHOI criteria or dual energy CT studies, they have better diagnostic value. As well as functional imaging technique like FDG PET CT are in use in particular to assessment of early treatment response. MRI cannot be considered as a prime standard for the assessment of therapeutic response in GIST. Thus, in the consensus report of German GIST imaging workshop, MRI is recommended only for liver-specific question or when contraindication to CT is present. And in conclusion, CT is still the standard method for evaluation of therapy response despite its several limitations. PET CT is helpful for assessment of early therapy response. However, more prospective data is needed to define its role as well as the appropriate time interval for therapy monitoring. In a comprehensive review published in 2018 by Trisha M. Parab et al., they have compared their various imaging modalities and disadvantages. As I have already told, these are the advantages and disadvantages. Where they showed that in case of CT enterography will have better diagnostic yield. Now I will come to the newer diagnostic radiology as well as which has as a diagnostic as well as therapeutic, not therapeutic, diagnostic as well as other purpose, which is endoscopic ultrasound. Since most of these tumors are located in esophagus, stomach, duodenum, and rectum, endoscopic because first of all it allows the localization of any subendothelial lesion very effectively, and also it has its own characteristics. And fine needle aspiration biopsy can be obtained under sonoscopic guidance. GIST typically appear as hypoepic mass in the layer corresponding to third layer, that is muscularis propria. It is complementary with CT, more accurate than CT in differentiating benign from malignant, and more comprehensive evaluation of the surrounding structure than CT. Now, what are the characteristics of malignant GIST? Through endoscopic ultrasound. This size is an independent predictor. More than 4 cm is a high chance of malignancy. Heterogeneous echogenicity, internal cystic areas, and irregular border, mostly in the extraluminal surface. Now, how to differentiate from leiomyoma? Inhomogeneity, hyperechoic spots, marginal halo, and high echogenicity than surrounding muscle layer. These are typical characteristics of leiomyoma. And what are the aspects of endoscopic biopsy? Because biopsy provide definitive diagnosis may be required when preoperative therapy is needed in case where tumor is unresectable or more marginally resectable. And biopsy may not be necessary if the tumor is surgically resectable. This picture is shows that if we find any endothelial lesion, should we directly go for FNAB? No. If we go for endoscopic ultrasound, we can differentiate that all these 4 pictures are of subendothelial lesion. But picture 1 is actually of gastric lipoma, showing high echo mass in B. Picture C is of a gastric cyst, which is showing anechoic mass. Picture E is actually extragastric compression by splenic artery aneurysm, whereas picture G is actually gastric varices. But by only simply doing an endoscope, all this looks very similar. But while doing an endoscopic ultrasound, we can easily differentiate between all these subendothelial lesions. This picture, as we all know, in the various layers that we can identify in this endoscopic ultrasound, GIST lies in the middle. We can along the x-axis we can see the echo level, starting from aneuploic to hyperepic, and along the y-axis, these are the various 5 layers of endoscopic ultrasound. Gist is found in the 4th layer in the central part, whereas lipoma is in the 3rd layer with more hyperequic region. This picture really helps to identify what are the different subendothelial lesions that we can find, and what are the variety of types of subendothelial lesions that can be easily diagnosed using endoscopic ultrasound. Now, what are the importance of endoscopic ultrasound with immunohistochemistry? 4 pictures all showing hypoequic mass lesion in subendothelium in the muscularis. But if we take biopsy from this lesion and do under immunohistochemistry, if there is KIT positive or DOG1 positive, it is a GIST. Now, if it is alpha SMA positive, then it is a leiomyoma. Both are spindle cell tumor, but immunohistochemistry will differentiate between the two. Now, if there is CD20 positive, then this lesion becomes a malignant lymphoma. Whereas if there is synaptophysin positive, then the same lesion becomes neuroendocrine tumor. So the importance of immunohistochemistry is in endoscopic guided biopsy comes into use. So how to manage subendothelial lesion? If we find a hypoequic mass, we should differentiate that whether it is less than 1 centimeter or more than 1 centimeter. If it is less than 1 centimeter, we can follow up 6 monthly. It is more than 1 centimeter, we should do endoscopic FNA with immunohistochemistry. From there, we can differentiate whether it is GIST, it is leiomyoma or other lesion, and we should proceed accordingly. So, from this paper, what we can find out is how to manage small subendothelial lesion which are suspected to be GIST. Most small GIST are discovered incidentally, and usually they show benign or indolent course. Strict discrimination between benign and malignant GIST is considered to be very difficult using clinical and pathological examination. NCCN suggests small GIST less than 2 centimeters may be periodically evaluated with endoscopic ultrasound when they lack high-risk features. As I told, endoscopic ultrasound features like irregular border, cystic space, ulceration, echogenic focus, and heterogeneity. And as per SEED database, of the 374 histologic diagnosed GIST less than 2 centimeters, around 11% had regional distant metastasis at the time of diagnosis, and 5-year mortality rate was 12%. So just less than 2 centimeters, we cannot just leave. So even NCCN guidelines still consider less than 2 centimeters of stomach lesion as benign, but current diagnosis, current update us saying that any subendothelial lesion, anything more than 1 centimeter should be evaluated with FNA, and less than 1 centimeter should be periodically observed. Now, going to risk classification and follow-up. Modified Fletcher or Joensuu risk classification, I think everybody knows about this slide. Like which tumors are high risk. This is defined according to tumor site, the mitotic index for 50 HPF or 5 millimeter square area, as we can go by NCCN, and the tumor size. But this is a 2D model, 2-dimensional. Now Joensuu himself has updated this this risk classification, where he has used a heat nomogram or heat map or contour mapping, where he has used, I can say, like 4 dimensions are being used. How to identify. This paper was published in Lancet in 2012. The risk of recurrence at 10th year of surgical treatment of GIST is calculated using a maximum diameter of tumor, the number of mitosis, tumor site, presence and absence of tumor capsule rupture. So as you can see in ABC, they include gastric, non-gastric, and extra intestinal GIST with rupture unknown. D, E, F are gastric, non-gastric, and extra with no rupture, whereas G, H, I are picture of gastric, non-gastric, and extra gastric with rupture. So how we can predict using this map? Physicians and patients can predict the probability of recurrence in the 10th post-op year, and it is useful for individualized decision making with respect to adjuvant therapy. So if we consider one picture, it was initially difficult to understand this picture, but if you give me some time, I can make you understand how this picture is studied. Like the middle map, like if we go for the D column, far left, shows a 10-year risk of GIST recurrence of patient diagnosed with a 10 centimeter. If we can see along the y-axis, these are the mitotic count, and if we see the HIT nomogram, the risk of recurrence. So in a GIST, 10 centimeter gastric GIST with 5 microcysts per 50 HPF of microscope and no rupture is 20 to 40%. Whereas if there is similar tumor with mitotic rate 10 per 50, the risk 10-year risk increases to 40 to 60%. So following this nomogram, it is better predicted. And in the same paper also, he followed up strategies of patient with GIST with or without imatinib therapy after surgery in the same risk classification, where these tumors are need to be follow up based on this criteria itself. This is quite detailed. I will skip this follow up list. And in a recent publication, by Trisha and Parag, a comprehensive review. But in a recent comprehensive review, as we can see, mitotic rate in extragastric lesion, like in duodenum and rectum, as per the NCCN guideline, very high chance of metastasis in duodenal and rectal, even in less than 2 centimeter lesion. So they should be followed up very strictly. And similarly, if the lesion is more than 2 centimeter, the chance of metastasis increases very high in more in duodenal lesion, whereas in gastric lesion they are still low. I think because of this only, there was a change in NCCN that it has differentiated between gastric and non-gastric. So I will be highlighting some points in NCCN which I think are important to understand. Like for principle of biopsy in GIST. GIST a soft and fragile tumor. Endoscopic FNA biopsy of primary site is preferred over percutaneous biopsy because the risk of hemorrhage and intra-abdominal dissemination. Consideration of biopsy should be based on suspected tumor type and extent. Biopsy is necessary to confirm the diagnosis of primary GIST prior to initiation of pre-op therapy. Percutaneous image-based biopsy may be appropriate for metastatic disease. Diagnosis is based on the principle of pathologic assessment and referral to center with expertise only. Testing for mutation in KIT and PGRF is strongly recommended, according to NCCN. Testing for germline mutation of HDA gene should be considered in wild-type GIST. While tumor size and mitotic rest are used to assess the risk of metastasis of GIST, it is notoriously difficult to predict the biological behavior based on pathological features only. So, guidelines for risk stratification of tumor site has been developed. More gastric GIST behave in an overall indolent manner, and smaller than 2 centimeter are usually benign, whereas small intestine GIST are more aggressive than their gastric counterpart. GIST of colon is most commonly seen in rectum, and colonic GIST tend to have aggressive behavior, and tumor mitotic activity can metastasize despite a small size. And specific mutation in KIT or PDGFR show small correlation with tumor phenotype, but mutations are not strongly correlated with biological potential or tumor behavior. So accumulated data show that KIT mutation are not preferentially present in high-grade tumor and can also be found in small incidental lesion as well as tumor that have benign course. So mutation analysis cannot be used to predict the behavior of individual tumor. And if we go to the principle of surgery, how surgery is being modified in GIST in the recent NCCN guideline. For primary resectable GIST, the surgical procedure performed should aim to resect the tumor with histologically negative margin. And given the limited intramural extension, extensive anatomical resection is not indicated. Only segmental and wedge resection to achieve negative margin is sufficient. Lymphadenectomy is usually not required given the low incidence of nodal mass. GIST tends to be very friable and every effort should be made not to violate the pseudocapsule. Resection is not indicated for microscopically positive margin on final pathology. Resection should be accomplished with minimal morbidity and in general, complex multivisceral resection should be avoided. If the surgeon feels that multivisceral resection is required, then multidisciplinary consultation regarding the course of pre-op imatinib should be taken. Rectal GIST should be approached via sphincter sparing approach. And if APR is necessary to achieve a negative margin, then pre-op imatinib should be considered. Laparoscopic approach can be considered for selected GIST in favorable anatomical location like greater curvature, anterior wall, jejunum, and ileum by surgeon with appropriate laparoscopic experience. Oncological principle of GIST resection must still be followed, like preservation of pseudocapsule and avoidance of tumor spillage. Resected specimens should be removed in a plastic bag to avoid spillage of seeding. Unresectable and metastatic GIST. Imatinib is the primary therapy for metastatic GIST. Surgery can be indicated when limited disease progression refractory to imatinib, or locally advanced or previously unresectable tumor which has become resectable by preoperative imatinib, or in case of symptomatic bleeding or obstruction. Imatinib can be stopped right before surgery and restarted as soon as patient is able to tolerate oral medication. If other TKI like sunitinib, regorafenib are being used, therapy should be stopped at least 1 week prior to surgery and can be restarted based on clinical judgment. Now coming to R0 versus R1 resection. A new systematic in Poland started to find whether is there any difference of R0 resection versus R1 resection. And he gone through many series where they tried to identify the influence of R1 resection in the recurrence-free survival. And they came out with some conclusions. The risk of intraperitoneal bleeding or tumor perforation may be decreased after neoadjuvant imatinib in high-risk tumor. So, by which enabling complete resection, increasing integrity of pseudocapsule, improving quality of margin, and increasing chance of relapse-free survival. Result of meta-analysis indicated that adjuvant imatinib therapy can decrease the risk of recurrence in primary GIST after R1 resection. In case of primary resection with positive margin by histopath assessment, a careful re-evaluation should be undertaken by an experienced pathologist to exclude false positive result. Intraperitoneal tumor rupture has the most significant consequence and shifting primary curable GIST to high risk or micrometastatic disease, like stage upgradation. So iatrogenic perforation should always be avoided. Another paper in 2012, they studied microscopic positive margin for primary GIST. That they analyzed the risk factor and tumor recurrence, and they concluded that 9% of GIST patients had R1 resection, and the significant risk factors for R1 resection included tumor size more than 10 centimeter, location, and tumor rupture. But the difference in recurrence-free survival with or without imatinib therapy in those undergoing R1 versus R0 was not statistically significant as per their study. Now, coming to surgery for early GIST. In Hindawi, a paper was published in 2018, which took a clinical overlay management of GIST using minimal access endoscopic resection as well as endoscopic and laparoscopic cooperative study. And they have found that there are a variety of methods by which endoscopy, only endoscopy, some advances in endoscopy, and using the combination help of endoscopy and laparoscopy, there are several methods by which GIST or any subendothelial tumor of small size can be removed. Out of which I am going to talk about two of the important newer findings which I found very interesting. Like one is laparoscopic endoscopic cooperative surgery, and another one is endolaparoscopic intergastric tumor excision. If we go through the literature, the endoscopic enucleation procedure had more complication rate. It is quite obvious because these are subendothelial tumor and the chance of tumor like serosal perforation was high if we purely go through endoscopic nucleation procedure. But if we go through full endoscopic, full thickness resection or endolaparocooperative process, we have found, especially in endolaparoscopic, the newer techniques, according to the study, completion rate, complication, and procedure time all were found to be beneficial. If we go to an article where this cooperative dissection using laparoscopy and endoscopy was used without causing injury to mucosa, how this surgery was performed. This design endoscopic submucosal puncture was done with followed by water injection so that colored water cushion between the small stromal tumor and submucosa, which was more conductive in accurately localing and opening of the serosa of interstitial tumor guided by laparoscope, and in removing of the submucosal tumor under the submucosa so as to protect the mucosal layer. Due to existence of submucosal water cushion, it could effectively ensure the integrity of the false capsule. This combination group, the cost of tumor dissection related to consumable was significantly lower than the purely endoscopic or laparoscopic surgical group. And appropriate cases to carry out this new operation still needs further research. This is the picture where dye is pushed endoscopically in the submucosal layer, and laparoscopically it was identified that portion, and subserosal the serosal layer was cut, tumor was dissected, and suture was done under laparoscopic guidance. And another one is the combined endolaparoscopic excision of gastric neoplasm, intergastric excision, where what was done, a combination help of an endoscopy as a surgeon was used. Endoscope camera was inserted, and laparoscopically, first the small bowel was clamped, so that stomach distension is only there, it doesn't progress. And now into the stomach ports were placed, and laparoscope were introduced inside the stomach, and the tumor was excised. Here, the study was done with normal laparoscopic excision, but another SAGES study has shown that even stapler can be introduced by this technique to excise the pedunculated lesion. Local excision is difficult at region like cardia as pre-pyloric region, where partial or total gastrectomy may be necessary. This kind of surgery actually helps to avoid major resection in case of small stomach tumor located in bad position like in cardia or pre-pyloric region. Now coming to surgery for advanced GIST, our MSK-CC study highlighted the role of metastatectomy. It was done by Fairweather et al. And I will like to highlight some of the points. The use of metastatectomy in advanced GIST. Tumor exposed to imatinib develops secondary mutation that confers resistance. Now, surgically debulking metastatic disease with the hope of removing resistant clones, removing as much as stable and responding disease is feasible to minimize the development of secondary resistance and also prolong the time of progression. So in the study of 323 patients with metastatic GIST have on imatinib, sunitinib, and even on third-line tyrosine kinase. Patient with responsive disease at the time of surgery did their best with medial progression survival up to 31 months. But patient with stable disease, unifocal progression and multifocal progression had a progression-free survival of 19, 10, and 5 months respectively. Multifocal progression and high tumor mitotic rate were independent predictors for worst PFS. It is reasonable to consider surgery on patients with advanced GIST responding to stable or having unifocal progression on imatinib, whereas surgery plays a very limited role who are already on second line or third line tyrosine kinase inhibitors, because it reflects a more aggressive tumor biology. Now, a question comes to mind. Like we have a patient in the BHU, 55-year-old male, who was diagnosed of a 9 by 8 by 9 centimeter pelvic mass in the lesser pelvis, and it was compressing over extension from anorectal junction. It was compressing over the urethra, as we can see in the first MRI scan. And patient came with complaint of constipation with urinary retention and similar features. So what was done? It was the MRI suggested it could be a rectal GIST. So we did a pelvic true-cut biopsy, and it came out to be DOG1 and KIT positive. So the patient was started on imatinib, and the patient was followed up for 7 months. What we found that the tumor has shown a good response. The tumor has shrunken. All the local the pressure effect over the urethra, over the bladder, it has gone. Patient is having passing normal stool, normal urine, and absolutely fine. So our study, this is the second MRI of the patient, which has shown that it has responded very well in comparison to the May MRI. So we are continuing on the imatinib, and we will again after 6 months we are going to repeat an MRI. So the question to the panel after my discussion will be whether surgery can be absolutely avoided, like we can continue with imatinib only. I will ask the respected seniors regarding this. This is a ESMO guideline in 2018, where they thought of what are the different way of managing a GIST. Like one can go for upfront surgery, and if all the cancers are removed, if there is high risk of recurrence, they can start adjuvant imatinib, or can go for observation. And if all cancer is not relieved, like an R1 resection, they should be considered for imatinib or can consider for second surgery. Whereas if neoadjuvant imatinib was given, surgery can be done in primary as a primary treatment, where similarly all cancer can be removed. Some of the R1 resection or metastasis can be there, but in all the cases, imatinib should be continued as adjuvant. But they have also said the primary imatinib with a very good response can stay on imatinib as a primary treatment. No surgery is required. But on reviewing our literature, I could not find any paper where they're saying no surgery is required, because all of the papers are saying this surgery is the best primary treatment for GIST. So going to the neoadjuvant trials for imatinib. This is RTOG 0132 trial. That is a very famous trial, which took the role of imatinib as a neoadjuvant and adjuvant setup and its response. So if we can go to the scheme of this trial, all locally advanced KIT positive or metastatic GIST were in group A. Group A were the primary more than 5 centimeter, whereas in group B more than 2 centimeter metastatic disease. And they were given 600 milligram preoperative chemotherapy for 12 weeks. And the stable disease and partial responder were dissected and continued for 2 more years. Assessment was progression-free survival, recurrence rate, toxicity, and overall survival. Whereas those who undergo progression, they were opted out of the study. So what was found that patient with advanced primary GIST and the preoperative use of imatinib in group of patient with potentially operable metastatic or recurrent disease, it was concluded that this approach has a very good result. Like they have RECIST criteria wise, group A has up to 83% was stable disease, whereas in group B up to 91% was stable disease, and overall survival was more than 90% in both groups, and complication of surgery and imatinib toxicity were minimal. But this was only 2-year post-op study. If we go for in 2012, a long-term follow-up of this RTOG 0132 was done, and it concluded that a high percent of patients experience disease progression after discontinuation of the 2-year maintenance imatinib therapy after surgery. So imatinib should be considered for longer in intermediate and high risk GIST patients. This was the first thing that came into mind for this neoadjuvant versus adjuvant, the duration of adjuvant, whether neoadjuvant was good or not. And after that, many study came. It was like Apollon study. It was a phase 2 study, whereas this Brazilian study, all the study actually showed that imatinib for 6 months in locally advanced disease as a neoadjuvant therapy has a better response. So finally, in 2018, this analysis was done using four phase 2 studies. They found the preoperative therapy imatinib is safe and recommended for patients with locally advanced GIST. Neoadjuvant imatinib therapy may enable less invasion and organ sparing surgery, avoid tumor rupture during extensive resection, and improve quality of perioperative treatment. Now coming to adjuvant trial, I won't go to the details, but these are some of the trials that has taken place, still ongoing. And among this, the Scandinavian Sarcoma Group 18 trial actually found out the 3 years of imatinib is better than 1 year, whereas the various studies are going on, which are actually comparing imatinib 3 years versus 5 years, 3 years versus 6 years. So what is going on is actually people are yet to identify what is the ideal duration of imatinib that to be given in adjuvant in high risk or at intermediate risk group. But it has been found in all studies that imatinib as an adjuvant drug is showing excellent response in those tumors which are KIT or DOG1 positive. Now we will go beyond imatinib. As we can see, as we have seen the exon mutations, the mutation analysis, in case of 11 exon mutation, which is 70%, imatinib response is up to 85%, whereas in exon 9 mutation, the imatinib response is only 45%. So that's the reason where in exon 9 mutation, you need to give double dose of imatinib. Whereas in exon 13 and 17, they are very less, and the response to imatinib also is very low. Whereas PDGRFA 842V 4% of mutations are there, and imatinib response is none. Whereas other PTGR mutation can have some response, and in the wild type they have very little imatinib response. So how it was classified? According to Lee and Rout, targeted therapy and personal medicine in GIST, they said that unresectable metastatic need mutational profiling. After that, we should go whether they have PDGRFA D842 mutation or they are KIT PDGRFA wild type mutation. So if it has KIT exon 9 mutation, then we should give 800 milligram daily. Otherwise, we should give 400 milligram daily. In spite of that, if there is disease progression, then we should switch to second line like sunitinib or consider surgery for ineffective progression. In spite of that, there is progression, we should go to regorafenib, and in spite of that, we should go to take the patient to clinical trial. And if there is no progression, then we should consider either surgery in case of responsive stable disease or continue with imatinib indefinitely. The same study, actually, the same paper gave us a list of these tyrosine kinase inhibitors that we are using currently, of which imatinib is the first choice of drug, sunitinib is second, regorafenib, pazopanib, and sorafenib are the third line, whereas dasatinib has a very specific role. Like dasatinib has been found to be sensitive in PGGRFA 842V exon 8 mutation, whereas exon 11 is both imatinib and regorafenib sensitive. Exon 9 is responsive to high dose imatinib or sunitinib, whereas wild type are imatinib resistance, but they are regorafenib sensitive and also dasatinib sensitive. Now, a paper by Regavini Italian study, they actually took another way of approach of the drugs like succinate dehydrogenase. They have actually epigenetic changes. So they have tried to find out whether distribution of MGMT methylation in the succinate dehydrogenase group, whether using demethylating agent is helpful. Apart from tyrosine kinase inhibitor, mTOR inhibitors, and heat shock protein inhibitors, the role of demethylating agent is being studied. And they have found that approximately 2/3 of HDA deficient GIST have this MGMT methylation, 1/5 of NF1 associated GIST, 2/5 of wild type GIST, and 1/20 of KIT mutant GIST. Whereas no MGMT methylation was reported in PDGRFA mutant GIST. So this shaded area in this pie chart is the region of MGMT methylation, where demethylating agent can have some role. Now further research is going on of other newer tyrosine kinase, of which PLX9486, DCC2681, avapritinib, which is BLU285, and lorlatinib. All these newer TRK inhibitors are being evaluated, of which avapritinib has in the phase 1 Navigator study has shown excellent response as a second or third line management, whereas it has shown in particular PDGRFA D842V mutation, they have been found to be the best responder. So FDA has approved as a first line management avapritinib in this January 2020. FDA has who has been mutationally diagnosed to be 842V mutation, avapritinib can be used as first line management. And a new study is ongoing where they are comparing avapritinib versus regorafenib. It is called the Voyager study, where they are comparing these two for locally advanced unresectable and metastatic GIST. And another study has found that nivolumab and ipilimumab in metastatic and unresectable GIST has some role. Like these are the immunotherapy, and as immunotherapy is being used in all cancer and showing response in heavily pretreated GIST, where these populations are not responding to any TKI, if we go for nivolumab and ipilimumab, they have shown to have some response. Thank you.
Thank you, Menak. Very lengthy and very well covered.
Yeah, actually, I just finished my own webinar.
Yeah.
So I missed the first part, but still then very good presentation, very lengthy, extensive. So the basic question is that how do you differentiate from any other adenocarcinoma for stomach?
Sir, if we go for endoscopic ultrasound, it has found that it is this mesenchymal lesion are found mostly in the fourth layer, whereas adenocarcinoma will be in the first layer, the origin of the lesion. For the small tumors, GIST can be easily differentiated, and the echogenicity also helps us to identify GIST from other subendothelial lesion. Actually, sir, I have gone through this topic in my initial few slides. So,
So
using
my
endoscopic
point was,
ultrasound, GIST can be
No, no.
very,
My
very
point
specifically
was-
diagnosed at
no,
present.
my point
And which
was
is
when
quite a
you
boon
do,
for.
yeah. So you are talking of the technical point. My point is clinically, when
Yes,
you find some symptom
Yes,
with somebody, he comes to you,
Yes, sir.
then you do a
Yes, sir.
endoscopy. And on endoscopy, mucosally, you may not find anything.
Yes, yeah, obviously.
So,
Yes.
my take was, my first answer will be that along with the CT scan, whenever we find such type of a lesion where endoscopically you don't see anything,
Yes.
then you immediately go for one MRI.
Okay.
So that is the first response. Definitely endoscopy ultrasound has edge over every investigation. Endoscopy ultrasound is the best to localize the GIST actually.
Yes.
But Rudra, the literature doesn't show any role of MRI in management of GIST actually.
No, because endoscopic ultrasound, some places
Yes.
it may not be available even.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So CT plus MRI. Then if your availability is there, then you go for ultrasound. That will help in both ways. Both it will localize and you can go for FNAC also.
Yes.
But Rudra sir, if the EUS is available, then I might not go for MRI. Then
No. If a US is available, you can go ahead. But a common question, what is asked by the examiner, nobody will jump to US. That is what my point in making. Always you tell ki then we go for MRI, then we go for US. But
Rudra,
like at my place, I will not do a MRI. I will directly go to US because we are doing US left and right.
yes, Rudra, and this is the answer that I would like to hear in the exam from my students. Even if they don't do it, they should know that this should have been done. They have to know that this should be done.
Then it is good actually.
Yeah, they should know that this is the first investigation of choice.
Actually lost it some 4 times because it's raining heavily here. The internet connection 4 times I lost the talk actually. But anyway, this is something that we have not seen as students. Is it not, Manoj bhai?
I
Just
think
something that
I
we
think
have
we
never
used
heard
to
as students.
we used to call them leiomyosarcoma at that time.
Correct. So much has happened in one area. If there has been a sea of change, it is, I think, gastrointestinal stromal tumor. Is it not?
Yes.
Yeah, correct.
As an entity, it embodies progress as far as science is concerned. See, it's not differentiation between adenocarcinoma and the stromal tumor, but within the stromal tumors, whether you can actually keep on subclassifying them so that they respond well to the drug that you actually give. So
Yes.
the challenge is to understand whether it would actually respond to a treatment or not, rather than histology. Is it not, Manoj
That's
bhai?
true. That's true. That is where the research is now going in. The research is basically focusing on 15% of
Correct.
those which are KIT and DOG1 negative.
Absolutely, yes. You are chasing 15 out of 100 now.
15 out of 100 now.
Correct.
Because 85% can be treated.
Yeah, correct. Very true.
Yeah.
But whatever I heard, I think it was a very good presentation. He has worked very hard on his presentation.
Yes.
Worth storing the presentation. Yes.
Dr. Meena.
Sir, sometime when the patient is on the imatinib, and in the follow-up, we found that some patient develop a side effect like anemia or neutropenia. So either we have to stop for some days, or either we have to go for alternative. What we have to do?
Whenever you have a bone marrow side effects, you have to stop the therapy, give GCSF, and as soon as your count and absolute neutrophil count is normal, you go back. But with imatinib therapy, the at
Chances
least
are
with the
less.
chances are very less if you are using
Very
400
less.
milligram. It is high if you are using higher dose like 600 milligram.
If you use 600, it might happen.
600, 800, it might happen.
Yeah, correct.
But usually it is not much. Anshika wants to ask something.
So,
Sir, I wanted to ask in the neoadjuvant imatinib,
Yeah.
where in the setting we are giving it to reduce our surgical burden in
Yes.
that situation so that we don't have to do multi-organ. So usually we go ahead with the functional imaging immediately after starting the imatinib, soon after we start imatinib. In case we do not get a good response on the functional imaging of PET CT scan, so at that time, do you increase the imatinib dose or you go ahead with the surgery at that time?
The recommendation is to wait for at least 3 months before you change the dose, because you may not see the response within a month. So the recommendation is to have an imaging at 3, 6, and 9. And beyond 9, we don't know, because most of the people who, most of the trials where a neoadjuvant imatinib has been given, the patient has been operated by 9 months. So beyond
So, sir,
9
at
months,
3 months, if you do that functional imaging PET CT scan, and you see that even the other than anatomical, even the functional response is not there. So at that time, you would recommend to increase the dose or go ahead with the surgery?
I'll recommend that you do a mutational analysis to find out
Okay.
your patient doesn't lie in 15%.
For operable, meaning you were giving it as neoadjuvant to reduce the
Operable,
surgical.
then even if it is operable, you'll require something to be given in adjuvant period.
Sure.
So you would like to know whether your patient is going to respond to your adjuvant, or what adjuvant are you going to use after the surgery. So it is fine that you can go ahead and operate if the disease progression is there, or if the disease is stable. Most of the people operate, but most of the people wait till 9 months before operating.
Manoj bhai, there is a question by Saurav. I
Yep.
think it's a very relevant question. Would you not do a mutational study before any neoadjuvant therapy?
Ideally, it should be.
It should be, yes.
Ideally, it should be.
Ideally, it should be.
Ideally, it should be.
And what is your opinion about no surgery at all? That is something that he brought it up and then left it open.
Along with him, I have also been doing the research on GIST, and have read close to more than 1,000 articles in last 2 days. There are case reports. There are case reports where patients who have a complete response to imatinib therapy has not been operated. But the number of cases, such cases, is limited to about 10 in literature.
So it's both metabolic response and
yes,
an
complete
imaging
tumor,
response.
complete imaging response.
Complete
radiological response.
Radiological, both metabolic and otherwise.
Yes. So this is about 10 cases have been reported in literature, and this number is slowly increasing. Slowly, this number is increasing.
Have you operated some patient twice or thrice? Subbu sir and you both.
Yeah,
we used to do it earlier. We used to operate a number of times. I remember one small bowel I operated, I think 6 times. So
yeah, correct.
So we used to have, because you will operate from one place and he'll come back with another small 2 centimeter or 3 centimeter lesion somewhere else, and then you go in and operate again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is something of rare occurrence now with imatinib coming up.
Correct. Now,
because after the surgery, all high risk will go for imatinib therapy.
Correct. Multiple explorations have come down. After imatinib and the other drugs have come in, actually.
Yes. After the adjuvant therapy, it has come.
That is the biggest advantage that we have now, actually.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. There are some questions.
One of those places where it actually helps the surgeon to decide against surgery, is it not? So,
sir, what is the maximum you can give the imatinib for 3 years, or either we go for 6 years?
Imatinib, if you ask me, the maximum we have is from CML, and you can give it for life.
Yeah, correct.
No, sir, for GIST.
For GIST, the literature, most of the studies of adjuvant has stopped at 2 years. But when the long-term results of this 2-year studies came, it was realized that the failure rate is higher, and people realized that it should go for more than 2 years. So now people are trying to find an optimum duration of imatinib treatment. They are comparing 3 years, 5 years, 6 years. So probably in near future, we'll find out which is better. And it is quite possible that we may come to a conclusion that you give it till the progression or lifelong, like you give it in CML. I see no harm. I see no harm in giving it.
But Manoj bhai, at what dose do they tolerate such long duration treatment?
400 milligram. 400 milligram OD.
If they need a higher dose, many of them would actually progress maybe.
On progression, you have to double the dose. That's a dictum. But most of the people, as Rudra bhai said, doesn't tolerate 800, and they have to be kept on 600, or they have to be changed to other drugs. The second line of drug is Sutent, which is quite expensive actually in India.
So one of my patients had a for post surgery for 3 years imatinib 600. First to start with 1 year 400, then we increased to 600. After 3 years, we thought she's doing very fine. Her 3 daughters are pilots actually. So she thought she's doing fine, everything. So she stopped as per the advice of the medical oncologist. Then after 6 months, we found there were multiple very small nodules in the abdomen. And we again restarted. And now it is again 4 years. So this patient is in follow-up for 8 years. And till now, she has not stopped. She's on 600 since last 8 years.
Yes, this happens. So I'll take some questions that has come on the chat.
Yeah,
one of the question is management of locally advanced GIST with the PDGFRA mutation non-8D842V. So Mainak, you want to take up this question?
Yes, sir. If there is a PDGFRA mutation and it is non that particular exon 18 mutation, imatinib has some role. So if we should start with imatinib and wait for 3 months and then do a image or functional study. If it is showing non-response or progression, then we have to shift to other therapy or surgery.
Yes. So Varun is asking, is preoperative setting how long you can give imatinib, when to reassess? The reassessment is done every 3 months, and the maximum recorded in the literature is 9 months. So up to 9 months one can wait. Do we want to get a preoperative biopsy in all the cases? No. Avinash Rajra has asked. We don't have to take a preoperative biopsy in all the cases. Lesion, current recommendation NCCN is less than 2 centimeter, and most people believe less than 1 centimeter. It is recommended that you do nothing but keep the patient on the serial follow-up. If it is greater than 4 centimeter operable, then you excise it without a preoperative biopsy. The preoperative biopsy is indicated only if you are planning to start a new adjuvant therapy. So only in cases where a new adjuvant therapy is planned, a preoperative biopsy is required. Otherwise, you can proceed for surgery without a biopsy here. If EUS is available, go for EUS. Yes, correct. Dr. Saurabh is asking, want you recommend mutational testing in all new adjuvant cases? Ideally, mutational testing should be done in all new adjuvant as well as upfront surgery cases also, because your choice of adjuvant therapy and response of adjuvant therapy can perhaps depend upon the mutational testing, even though your prognosis does not depend upon it. Is there a role of starting PET scan before starting an imatinib? Yes, because you want to have a functional response along with the radiological response. It is ideal that you get a PET scan if you're planning a new adjuvant imatinib, and then repeat the test every 3 months maximum. Liquid biopsy in GIST. I don't think that there is any special role for liquid biopsy in GIST. So when we are talking of liquid biopsy, we are basically talking about procedures where we do a DNA testing. So I'm not sure whether somebody can do NGS from a liquid biopsy samples. Liquid biopsy most of the time is used for PCR tests, for DNA test. How many days prior to surgery should imatinib be stopped? A day before. And when it should be restarted? As soon as you start the enteral nutrition. Do secondary mutation happen if we wait? This is a very difficult, Srijan's question is a very difficult question to answer, because we don't know of secondary mutations, because in most of the studies, a repeat biopsy has not been done on failure to, like there are no studies where a mutational analysis has been done, patient placed on treatment, and then on failure, a repeat biopsy is done. So this is something which we still don't know. Dose should be increased if no response, yes. Would you prefer any subsite where wait and watch therapy? Wait and watch is usually recommended for less than 2 centimeter tumors in stomach. All other tumors, wait and watch strategy is not recommended. D1 GIST less than 2 centimeter. D1 GIST less than 2 centimeter, again, you have to wait and watch as per the NCCN. But duodenum is an area which is non-gastric GIST, and most of the time it's in moderate to high risk category. So it is advisable that you do a FNAB, see what kind of a GIST you are dealing with, see the mitotic rate, and according to the mitotic rate, you decide what you want to do with it. How often a situation comes where we resect a subepithelial tumor after doing EUS, considering it being a GIST? Leiomyoma and GIST are usually differential diagnosis of each other. So at the time when we are doing a EUS and endoscopic resection, we don't know that we are dealing with the GIST or we are dealing with the leiomyoma. Only when the report of c-KIT and DOG1 is positive, then we call it a GIST. If they are negative, we previously used to think it is leiomyoma, when now we know that 15% of GIST also can be these two markers negative. Metastatectomy word is not divided. There is not enough literature. There is only one study which is available from MSKCC where metastatectomy has been done, and it has been shown that the response rate of metastatectomy is very good when used with second line or third line adjuvant. So I think I've covered all, and if there is anything else anybody wants to add.
Sir, what is the
And,
cost of the
hello.
complete IHC and mutational analysis in India on the biopsy, sir? How much is the cost?
ISC costs 600 rupees per marker. So if you have to put 2 markers only, that is 1200 rupees. And if you want to go for NGS in a private lab would cost anywhere around 20,000 rupees. So you are talking of about 21,000 rupees. So you think it is expensive, Anshika?
I don't know, sir, if it is depending on the situation of the patient, what kind of patients you get. I was just wondering about the number needed to treat versus
But
how many need imatinib only and how many
no.
in the primary
But
stage
initially,
before starting the treatment.
Initially, you can only go for 4 mutation, and which will hardly cost 2.5 to 3,000 rupees. And after that, if you are confirmed, you may not even do NGS. NGS is only done when you find some discrepancies or something.
Yeah, that is maximum I was talking about. We can go for PCR analysis for 3 mutations.
And nowadays the NGS
And,
cost has also come down after
around
so many
6,000
companies.
rupees.
So many
and
companies.
if the patient has to be on treatment, it is so much more expensive when compared to one-time investigation. Is it
One-time
not?
investigation.
Correct.
Not be talking too much about a one-time expenditure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Pankaj wanted to add something.
Yeah, sir, I just wanted to say that in some situations, rare situations, there is a role of HIPEC also in GIST for peritoneal disseminated disease. Sometimes the medicines may not work. So there is a role for HIPEC if we can do a R0.
What is the drug used, Pankaj?
Sir, usually mitomycin or cisplatin
Okay.
intraperitoneal. Yes.
Okay. Even I am not aware of many cases of HIPAC because to me, HIPAC was mostly being done for the adenocarcinomas and not for stromal tumor.
No, it can be done
But,
for rare
but
malignancies.
it's done for mesothelioma. It's done for intestinal peritoneal leiomyomatosis.
Yeah.
Sir, actually,
Yes.
in my last
None.
presentation, I had presented about this case reporting where in metastatic, I mean, peritoneal dissemination in GIST was treated by HIPAC. The last page actually, it was there.
Yeah, but it's only the case reports.
It is case report, sir. There is nothing more
Yeah,
than
it's
that.
not a standard.
literature on
But,
No, it's not a
if
standard.
things are not working, then one can think
See,
if the patient is fit enough.
I think Dr. Pankaj, GIST is one tumor which does not respond very well to chemotherapy. So
Yes.
a tumor which does not respond to a systemic chemotherapy probably will not respond to intraperitoneal chemotherapy. That is my understanding of how HIPAC works.
No, it's not the standard of care. I'm just saying that in rare instances, the HIPAC has also been done for localized to the peritoneal cavity.
Correct. You're desperate, so use something. Correct.
Yeah. There is one question that has come from Avinash Rajra, and he's asking that if there is a preoperative spillage because of a biopsy, it is necessary to give neoadjuvant imatinib. The spillage usually, the biopsy spillage is usually very, very rare. And if you look at literature, you will hardly ever come across spillage due to a biopsy. Most of the spillage occurs at the time of surgery because of the break of the pseudocapsule. Because this doesn't have a true capsule, and if the pseudocapsule breaks, there is a leak. Now, even if it is positive, the patient moves to a high-risk group and would require imatinib treatment.
That's all.
The dose remains the same. That is the Karthik Manohar's question, that even if there is a rupture, the dose remains the same. Only the risk prognostic category of the patient will change. So he will become worse prognosis. So that is why one has to be very careful in delivering the GIST, that it should not break. This is true for every tumor. Don't you agree, Subbu sir?
Absolutely.
Capsule breach should not occur.
Correct.
And that's the first principle of surgical oncology. Stay away from the tumor.
Yes. No, but the question of doing neoadjuvant, if there is capsule rupture, it would not be a common problem, because if you have decided to operate, you generally don't do a transperitoneal biopsy.
Yes, you don't do a biopsy at all.
You don't do a biopsy, and if you have decided to give neoadjuvant therapy, the question doesn't arise anyway.
Yes.
So anyway, you are doing it. So
That's
it's a rare situation.
I think he was asking if there is a transverse colon gist. Likely, recently we had a transverse colon gist with central necrosis, but we went and directly did the surgery. We never did the.
No, this is not about transverse colon.
Gist in transverse colon. Maybe.
Yeah.
No.
If you have necrosis, you are directly going for surgery. So there is no problem.
Yeah, if you are going for surgery, you are not taking a biopsy.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is a dictum for all the intraperitoneal and retroperitoneal sarcomas, including GIST.
Correct.
It's the same principle applies there.
Correct.
So if you think it is operable and you're going to operate, you just go ahead and operate. Only when you think that you are going to require a complex excisions, multivisceral resections, then you think in terms of not going in. And luminal structures like transverse colon or the small bowel, surgery is most of the time done because the obstruction or the subacute obstructions are more common.
Yes.
Luminal obstructions do occur.
Complications of the tumor, yes.
Complications of the tumor. Do we have any other questions from the resident?
Hello, good evening, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Saurabh.
Yeah, sir, I have we've got this one patient, 70-year-old, as I posted for duodenal GIST. Sir, there were multiple small tumors, less than 2 centimeter, scattered in the D1 segment only. And as you said, we can biopsy. The problem with biopsy is that some tumors will have a low mitotic rate. despite being large. So we don't know which tumors to biopsy and how to go about it, like to do a open duodenotomy and excise all these tumors, or to resect the D1 segment altogether. So how to manage these patients when there are multiple D1 tumors?
Do you have endoscopic ultrasound?
Sir, we don't have, but it was done for that patient, and we could localize multiple.
No, but could they take a biopsy from it?
Yes, sir. They took biopsy from one where they proved that it was just unfortunately fortunately the mitotic count in that case was low, but we don't know if it was higher in other. It might have been higher on the other tumors. So how to go about it?
Like 70 years, if you have a diagnosis of GIST, you have a low mitotic count, low risk patient.
Don't do anything.
Don't do anything. Just put him on imatinib if you want to do maximum.
Absolutely.
Okay. So actually, that is what we do.
He's one of those patients who you would have decided on the day one not to operate, only imatinib. Yes.
Yes, sir. But the only problem is the duodenal just have not that great. Like these are subsites where the progression is higher. So that is why we were
to answer Saurabh.
That is why we put the patient on imatinib, but we just wanted to confirm that would the other panelists will also take the same decision for such a patient.
Same thing. 70
years.
Absolutely
right.
You wanted public approval for a private crime.
I'm really sorry,
but we are with you.
That's okay. It's okay. We are with you. Dr. Roshan is asking if we detect GIST in post-operative in case of an emergency surgery performed for obstruction, what is the treatment protocol? Put him on imatinib and forget it, and then keep him on follow-up.
Sir, can I ask one more question, please?
Yeah, sure.
Sir, regarding, so we had got this patient with locally advanced. So in PDGFR mutations, would you use the same 400 milligram doses, or would you use a 800 milligram non-D842V mutations? Would you use the same doses?
Ideally, you should start with 400 milligram.
Okay.
Watch the patient, and if you don't have a response, you increase the dose.
Okay.
If there is no response to increase the dose, change the TKI.
Okay.
It is the same dictum. You always start with 400, go to 600, max increase to 800. If there is no response, then switch to other drugs.
Okay. So secondly, like we have this ongoing trial between 3 years and 5 years. In your clinical practice, any patient that you have continued beyond 3 years, judging on clinical parameters for an imatinib?
Lot of people have continued imatinib in case of GIST, because Rudra Bhai also showed you one case where you stop and the disease recurs. This is one of the problems. The moment you are going to stop the imatinib, within 6 months to 1 year, you are going to have a disease recurrence.
Right, sir.
And that is why in most of the cases, either you continue, or what you do is that you restart.
Okay.
If you have stopped, you restart.
Okay, sir. Okay.
That is what most of the time is being done.
Okay.
My take will be that if you start an adjuvant imatinib is a cheap drug in India. It's not a very big expense. So continue it.
Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Dr. Bhavna here, sir.
Bhavna.
Yes. There is one phase 2 trial for 5 years of imatinib postoperatively, and that is they will study hardly, I think, 80 to 90 patients, and it is yet to come as a randomized control trial. So we are not exactly sure whether to give a patient for 5 years or not.
Yeah, but we know that it has to be more than 2 years, because 138 has shown that 2 years you increase the failure rate.
Yes. People have given for 36 months, I mean for the 3 years, but for 5 years you still need a further randomized control trial.
Yes, but what is happening is that we know that it has to be more than 2 years now. That is for sure.
Correct. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So if there are no questions, I thank everybody. And thank you, Menak.
Manoj bhai.
Yeah, thank you,
It's
Menak.
very good, very good presentation. Very good presentation.
Very nice presentation.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Covered
thank you,
everything.
Menak.
Thank you, sir.
I still want to know about the contouring of gist. I still not, I didn't understand well, but I still read it. But very well covered.
I'll ask Menak to send you the presentation.
Please, sir.
You go through it, and
Okay.
we'll be happy if there is anything that we can resolve.
Correct. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good job, Manoj. Take care.